Jealousy and envy is a distraction. God has placed unique gifts inside of all of us, and it's up to us to be good stewards over these gifts and to not neglect the creative path that God has us on to go after somebody else's path. Because the truth is, you don't need their creative gifts. You just need to recognize yours. Welcome back to Christ Centered Creativity, the space where faith and creativity meet. I'm your host, Jada Simone, and here we edify you, encourage you, and inspire you to create within God's will and to execute the ideas He has blessed you with. Today's episode is a very special episode because today's episode is the season 1 finale. This feels like the last day of school when you know it's almost summer break. You're signing your friends' t-shirts, y'all have field day, but you're happy because you know once summer break is over, you and your friends are going to be back together. And this is exactly what this feels like because we will be back very soon with season 2. And what better way to close out season 1 than talking about envying other people's creative gifts? Envy and jealousy is the trap of the enemy. And it's important as Christian creatives that we do not give into the enemy's deception, because the truth is you don't need their creative gifts. You just need to recognize yours. So a very important part of combating envy and jealousy is to assess why you're feeling those feelings in the first place. And what better way to do that than taking these feelings to God, who knows all things. He will search our hearts and tell us why we're feeling these things in the first place, why you may be envying other people's creative gifts. James 3 verses 14 through 15 says, "But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Envy and jealousy does not come from God." So if those feelings are not of God, we know that when we're getting those thoughts of envy or jealousy, that we need to cast that down. We do not need to come into agreement with envy or jealousy, because envy or jealousy is not from God. It will not bear good fruit at all. And we're not called to hide feelings from God, even if the feelings feel bad or we feel guilty about it. That guilt is not from God. That's the enemy trying to get you to come into agreement with shame so that you never bring those feelings to God, and it just festers and it becomes something way worse than it started off as. James 3 verse 16 says, "For where you find envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." And I also want to read the KJV version. "For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work." Notice the words confusion and disorder. When you take your eyes off Jesus and you start to give into envy and jealousy, envying other people's creative gifts, you will have confusion because you've taken your eyes off your why and you put it on earthly things. You put it on the success of somebody else's life, and now you're trying to make that person's life your blueprint when that was never your blueprint. Somebody else's life is not your blueprint. Jesus is our blueprint. So He's the one we should be looking at. I remember back in college, I came into college majoring in visual art, but then my advisors recommended that I change my major to graphic design because they said graphic design is where you get actual jobs, and if I just had visual art on my resume, I basically wouldn't find a real job. And I also had a lot of peers around me who were graphic designers, so I was like, okay, maybe that is something that I should do. And I was completely wrong, because once I got into that major, I highly disliked it. I didn't feel like I was in the right major. I wasn't the best at graphic design, and that caused me to be jealous of other people's work, to envy what they were creating because I was not good at something that God never called me to be good at. God didn't call me into the graphic design field, but because I was looking at other people's lives and seeing what my advisor said or what everybody else was doing, I was confused. There was disorder. I didn't know what I was doing because I was not called there. I eventually did change my major back to visual art. But the point I'm making with that example in my life is that when you make other people's lives your blueprint, you will be confused. There will be disorder, especially when you're envying and jealous of other people's creative gifts instead of focusing on the ones that God placed inside of you. And when you take these things to God in prayer, asking Him what the root of these feelings are, it's important that you're real and ask yourself, am I feeling these feelings because I see somebody else showing up in excellence and I know I've been showing up in mediocrity, and seeing them show up in excellence shines a light on the fact that I haven't been showing up in excellence? Because sometimes those feelings of envy and jealousy come up because there's something that you're not admitting or something that you're not wanting to be real about, including showing up in mediocrity. When you see somebody else showing up in excellence, putting in the time and effort to improve their craft, and you know that you haven't been doing the best that you could do, it could stir up feelings of envy and jealousy. So it's important to ask God, why am I feeling this way? Is it because I'm showing up in mediocrity, or is it something deeper? Because God cannot fully access something if we're not being vulnerable with Him and allowing Him in. Another very important part of combating being jealous and envious of other people's creative gifts is to recognize the creative gifts that God has placed inside of you. To recognize something means to acknowledge the existence, validity, or legality of, and it also means to identify or know again. So you need to acknowledge the existence of the creative gifts that God has placed inside of you instead of looking at other people's lives, because God has placed unique gifts inside of all of us, and it's up to us to be good stewards over these gifts and to not neglect the creative path that God has us on to go after somebody else's path. Ecclesiastes 4:4 says, "Then I observed that most people are motivated to success because they envy their neighbors. But this too is meaningless, like chasing the wind." Jealousy and envy is a distraction, and it's like chasing the wind, just like Ecclesiastes 4:4 says. Imagine chasing the wind. You will never catch it. So imagine chasing somebody else's life, career path, trying to make your life like somebody else's when God gave you your unique life for a reason. He gave you your unique gifts for a reason. And it's important to renew your mind, because sometimes the reason that you're looking towards other people's lives and you're comparing yourself to others, you're jealous of their creative gifts, you wish you had their creative gifts instead of your own, it's because you think your creative gifts and the gifts that God has placed inside of you are insignificant, and that's not true. And what comes to mind is the parable of the talent, where the master gave each of his servants talents to steward over, making a return on the master's investment. Matthew 25:15 says, "To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey." That lets us know that God gives us what He knows we can steward over. He gives us what is unique for the calling and path He has on our life that He knows we can handle. So no, your creative gifts are not insignificant. It's what God called for your life. Matthew 25:29 says, "For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them." It's important that we recognize the creative investment that God has placed inside of us. If we don't, He will give that assignment to someone else. If you're not showing up where God has placed you, He will give it to somebody else, because His will be done regardless. So don't get distracted by watching what everybody else is doing. Don't get distracted by how God is using other people's creative gifts, but instead recognize the ones He's placed inside of you and steward over those well. Practice your craft, learn more, go back to school if that's what God is calling you to do. And there's also free resources online to just learn more, but don't give into the enemy's tactics of envy and jealousy. And my last and final point, and I would say is the most important point, is to fix your eyes back on Jesus. In other words, remember your why, which is Jesus. Your why isn't because you're envious and jealous of others and you're given into selfish ambition. Your why isn't wanting to compete with others, trying to make your life look like other people's lives. Your why is Jesus and pointing people to Christ. Once you fix your eyes back on Jesus, everything else falls back in line. When we take our eyes off Jesus, that's when things like envy, jealousy, and selfish selfish ambition can come into play because we've taken our eyes off the reason why we're creating in the first place. And it's really just vanity. When you take your eyes off Jesus and you're like, God, why did you give me their gifts? Because they look like they have more followers, or they are getting booked for all these events. Why isn't that me? It's really vanity because you don't know how much that person deals with spiritual warfare. You don't know what their consecration process is like. But because you're looking at their life on the outside and you think it looks good, you're telling God you want something that you may not even be able to handle. Because just like it said in the parable of the talent, God gives us what we can handle, what we have the ability to steward over well. So you looking at somebody else's life and say, I want to steward over that, is you assuming that you will be a good steward over that, and that just may not be true. We all have unique callings and abilities to steward over different things, and depending on the season you're in, God may not be calling you to steward over the platform that person has or that person has. He may be calling you to steward over 200 followers. He may be calling you to steward over these specific creative gifts in this season. And it's important that you decide to be a good steward over it. You fix your eyes on Jesus and remember why you're doing it in the first place, instead of being distracted by looking left and looking right. And it's so funny that I said that because I was reading Proverbs last night, and on this page, Proverbs 4 verse 25, it says, let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Keep your eyes on Jesus, and you won't be so distracted by other people's lives and how God is using them. Focus on how God is using you and be a good steward over it. Also, take a break from social media if you need to, because that's usually a common factor of why people are feeling jealous and envious of other people's lives, because you're constantly looking at other people's lives. Take a break. If God's calling you to take a break from social media, take a break. Or if you're called to be a content creator and you actually need to be on there in this season, set boundaries. Set screen time boundaries, making sure that you're just posting and getting off. Sometimes you just got to do that. And I want to close out with this verse. 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 11 through 12 says, and to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, you should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anybody. I hope today's episode of Christ-Centered Creativity was edifying for you. And I also want to thank you all so much for supporting the first season of Christ-Centered Creativity and for tuning into these episodes. If you like to connect on my personal/art page, I'll be sure to leave those links in the description. I look forward to coming back and building this community that God has blessed us with. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, be sure to give your girl a 5-star review. I hope you all have an amazing rest of the week. Stay blessed, stay creative, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.